The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Good morning, Pennsylvania. Welcome to another Ask the Experts. Hey, I don't know if you've realized it yet, but you kept writing us, asking us why we don't do the entire state of Pennsylvania. So a couple months ago, we moved the show. We are now covering all of Pennsylvania. We have such a great show planned today. Our expert has been with us several years. We get more compliments on this show. If you are a worker and you've ever been injured before or have a friend that's been injured before, you do not want to miss today's show. Let me welcome you to one of the finest workers' comp attorneys in the state of Pennsylvania, attorney Michael Cardamone. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Steve. How are you today?
Hey, Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, same to you.
So I got to tell you, we get more compliments on this show. And Michael, for some reason, workers' comp is really important in Pennsylvania versus other states around the country. I don't know why that is, but it is a very important area of law.
Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania's a big state. A lot of people don't realize that. You know, if you drive from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, that's a good 6 hours with two big cities flanking each side of the state, and a lot of workers. And it's a pretty friendly bar to the injured workers compared to some of the surrounding states. So a lot of people try to get their claims recognized in Pennsylvania because our laws are more fair, at least we think, than some of the other states. So it's probably a host of reasons why it seems to really be more talked about than maybe workers' comp in some other states.
Well, it seems like every week new people are finding the show. The numbers definitely show that. For people who have not seen one of your shows, and you're with us actually twice every month, we replay one of your shows. Tell people about your firm and yourself.
Sure. So I graduated from Boston College in 1996. I went to St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia, well-known prep school for all boys. Then I went to Villanova Law, graduated in 1999, and did workers' comp pretty much right away. I was thrown in the fire. I think the first day on my job, I was thrown into a hearing, white as a ghost, and shaking and trying to hide it. So I got a lot of experience right away. Eventually opened up my own firm in early 2014. And we're rare. All we do is workers' comp for injured workers. We don't represent insurance companies. We don't do anything else like personal injury or employment discrimination or criminal law. We just focus on workers' compensation, and it's really made us kind of stand apart from a lot of the crowd. Nothing wrong with the other firms that do workers' comp and some other things, but our clients have the peace of mind that they're with, somebody that's doing workers' comp all day long. And so, yeah, our main office is in Lansdale. We have another one in Philadelphia and Center City and some satellite offices. And most of our clients are from Lancaster and East, but we handle workers' comp cases all over the state. A lot of the hearings are by video these days, so it's really no disadvantage. So we even have some cases out in the Pittsburgh area, but primarily it's Eastern Pennsylvania that we that we have our clients based out of.
Michael, I've learned, this is our 12th year with Ask the Experts. I have learned when you have a firm that just concentrates in one area of law, that is usually the finest firm around, because you just concentrate in one area. You not have a list of areas of law that you concentrate on. And so I love the fact that you just do workers' comp. And what we want to accomplish with our show is, it's not a great idea to try to handle this yourself. And if you are hurt on the job, or you have a family member or a friend, you need to give them Michael's phone number, because first of all, they work on a contingency basis. If you go in there, you're not going to have to write them a check. Michael works on how well he basically does for you. And I got to tell you that you've got to not try to handle this yourself. Isn't that correct, Michael?
It is. And a lot of people have a fear that they need to send money or that it's going to cost them a lot. And I tell them, listen, it's going to cost you to not get
Yes.
an attorney on your side. It's just the truth. Workers' comp, the insurance companies, their goal in every case is to pay out as little benefits as they can. That's how they make their profits. And sometimes it takes a while to get through to the injured worker. They think that, they don't need anybody. The adjuster's friendly to them, and they chit chat about the Eagles game or the Phillies, and that they're on their side. And it's not the way it is. It's a very contentious system, especially when you're in court. These people are being spied on. A lot of them feel like they're being treated like criminals. They're being sent to doctors who are claiming that, they're magically recovered, and now their injury is just arthritis and not related to the work injury. So, at some point or another, most injured workers will realize, I need to lawyer up. And I think the stats show about the injured worker on average will get about 2 to 3 times more with an attorney than without. So, at different stages, people learn this. The earlier the people lawyer up, the better their case tends to go. And it's become a very complicated niche in Pennsylvania with a lot of nitty-gritty rules. And it's easy for an injured worker who's doing this on their own to get overwhelmed, and it's not a level playing field. So it sounds self-serving, but it's the truth. I always say this, the earlier they get advice, the better they do. That's the way it is.
Well, I want to get one more thing in, Michael, because it happens with your show a lot. I cannot tell you how many attorneys watch or listen to the show, and we get workers' comp attorneys that contact us wanting to do their own show, which we don't do, but they always say, you've got a great attorney. Michael has a great reputation. Now, usually in other areas of law, they'll go, well, you don't have the best one, or they're giving out bad information. I have never had an attorney, a local attorney, who didn't say how well respected Michael Cardamone is.
Well, that's really nice to hear. I try to have a balance between being a zealous advocate for my clients, which is, of course, an ethical obligation. You have to fight for them to the best of your ability, but also maintaining professionalism. And, you can be friendly with the other side, but still stick up for your client and not be abrasive with the other side. And of course, you're going to butt heads with some people here and there, but in general, the idea is to be courteous and professional, but at the same time, really pushing for everything your client is owed. And I think those two things are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to be nasty to get results. And so I think that's one of my strengths, is I've been able to walk that fine line between, really making sure I'm fighting for the clients, but also being courteous to the other side. And so that's, I think that helps in terms of, building your reputation.
Michael, we had a listener contact us who drives a truck, and he wanted to know, what if I'm in an auto accident, in a truck accident while working, is that personal injury or is that workers' comp?
That could be both. Now, if he's just commuting, that's not going to be considered in the course of employment, which you need to show for a work injury. But if he's driving a truck, presumably he's working at the time. So in this scenario, you would have your workers' comp case against the employer. And if it wasn't his fault or her fault driving the truck in terms of the accident, they could have a third-party case against the driver who, let's say they got rear-ended, against that driver and their insurance company. So you have two cases kind of side by side, one against the employer for the work injury. The second case, we call it a third-party case against the driver of the other car, if that other driver was negligent. Now, if it was the driver's fault in our case, he wouldn't have the third-party case. But in workers' comp, fault isn't relevant. So even if the accident was his or her fault, they could still have their workers' comp case, but they wouldn't have the third-party case. So it's going to depend on the situation.
What if they leave their office building to take, let's say, a cigarette break, and they slip on ice outside the building?
My opinion is that case is going to be a strong case for a work injury. I believe the case law says that a momentary departure from work for a personal comfort, it might even be called the personal comfort doctrine, I forget, but something along those lines where you're working, you need to step out to use the bathroom or to take a cigarette break or whatever, and you're injured. Most of the time, the courts will find that's a work-related injury, and especially with the slip and fall on the premises. If you're required to be there and there's a condition on that property and that caused your injury, you're going to be covered. So in that scenario, I would say there's a real strong case for that to be work-related.
What is there, Michael, is there a maximum rate a person can get per week who are when they're on workers' comp?
Yes. So for 2024, the max rate is $13.25 per week. So that's the most you can get in a week for your workers' comp checks. Even if you were someone that made $200,000 a year, for a lot of people, the workers' comp check is somewhat similar to a paycheck because the workers' comp check is not taxed. So even though it's so most people, it depends where you fall. There's some people in a 90% range, meaning they get 90% of their average weekly wage. That's if they're a low wage earner. The people in the middle will usually get 2/3 or 66.6% of their pre-injury average weekly wage. And then there's the max rate of $13.25. So for the people in the middle, their comp check isn't a huge hit usually because the comp check is tax-free. So it sort of ends up being somewhat equivalent to the regular paycheck. Problem is, when you're on comp, it never goes up. That check can only go down. And the cost of living, of course, each year goes up. So people that are on comp for a while, they tend to really get kind of squeezed into settlement mode because it gets harder and harder to live on that check.
Is there a maximum time you can be on workers' comp?
Not if you're totally disabled from your job. So if you're on what's called temporary total disability, we abbreviate it in Pennsylvania TTD, meaning you don't have any earnings. You can get that indefinitely for a lifetime, theoretically. That's very rare. Most people get converted to what's called a partial disability status, either by virtue of an earning power being established or after an impairment rating of under 35%. If you get converted to a partial rate, you're then stuck at a 500-week limit, which is about 9.5 years or so. So theoretically, you can be on comp for a lifetime. That's very rare. That's probably 1% of the cases or less.
I hope this is not a strange question, but do the insurance companies ever follow you around to see if you're really hurt?
Yeah, I don't see quite as much anymore as I did in the early 2000s, for example, earlier in my practice. it was more common where we would get surveillance video, and then we'd send it to our client and say, is that you? And what were you doing? And try to figure out if it's inconsistent or consistent with what they're alleging and what the doctor says in their medical reports. I don't see quite as much anymore. It still happens, but there's more social media investigation, I think. So they're really going after, meaning the insurance companies and their attorneys. They're really digging into people and, just pop in someone's name on Google and look on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and looking for what they're up to and what they're posting and things like that. So I think that's maybe more prevalent now, but there still is the old-fashioned, following people around and trying to make a big deal over it. They're carrying a gallon of milk from the local convenience store, and they're making all these assumptions that they're not wincing in pain, and they appear to be moving about freely. And it's like, every now and then they'll get somebody working. That becomes serious, because if they're not reporting their earnings, that's a serious deal. Some of the other stuff's a little more gray. They're doing this, they're doing it for 5 minutes, taking out their trash cans, but maybe they had no choice. Maybe they did it in pain and they paid the price for it. So the surveillance videos, I find in general, aren't terribly hurtful to the injured workers, but it's a case-by-case thing. You just have to review it and figure out what's going on and take it from there.
Michael, if a person's working after the injury, but they're making less than they did when they were hurt, can they still get a partial work comp check?
Yeah, that's a common scenario. So they'd be entitled to 2/3 of the difference. So you have your pre-injury average weekly wage, and then you take your gross earnings after the injury. So you subtract the earnings from the pre-injury number, then multiply it by 0.66, and that will be their partial rate. So you have to prove, however, though, that the loss of earnings is directly due to the work injury. So maybe someone's working after an injury and they're making less money, but it's not due to the work injury. It's due to other situations. So you have to connect the work relatedness of that decrease in earning power to the work injury. But the short answer is yes, they're entitled to the partial. And once you're on that partial, as I said earlier, you can be on that for up to 500 weeks in Pennsylvania, potentially.
We've had two people ask basically the same question. What if you're part-time? Can you still get workers' comp?
Yes. Yeah, part-time is eligible as long as you're employed and you're injured in the course and scope of your employment. You're essentially covered. So even if you have part-time earnings and you're only making 150, 200 a week, now you'll be at that 90% range for your comp rate because of the low earnings. But it doesn't matter if you work 40 hours a week or 20 or 10. If you're injured in the course of your employment and you're an employee and not an independent contractor, then you're going to be covered.
What about if you're an independent contractor, Michael? Can you still get workers' comp?
No, and that's a gray area, because a lot of our clients are called independent contractors by the owner of the company, because the owner may not want to have workers' comp insurance. Maybe they're a contractor, but a lot of times we're able to show that they have control over this person in terms of their manner of work, how they do it. Maybe they're using their equipment. And we can show through the facts of the case that even though on paper they're called an independent contractor, in reality, they're actually an employee and subject to workers' comp. So we have cases every year where the employer is saying, hey, they're not really employed. And we're saying, yes, they are. And the courts will look at a whole variety of factors to figure that out. It really comes down to control. And that's a case-by-case basis. You kind of got to run through all the factors. How are they paid, and whose equipment are they using, and who tells them where to go and how to do it, their job, and these kind of things. So, but if you're deemed an independent contractor by the workers' comp judge, you're not getting any workers' comp. You're not subject to the act.
If I've always wondered, whose doctor Do you have to use the insurance company's doctor, or can you use your own independent doctor?
Great question. So in Pennsylvania, if the employer has a list of panel doctors and they meet certain technical requirements with posting it in a conspicuous area and then reminding the injured worker after they get hurt and having a list of certain doctors, if they meet all these requirements, they're supposed to treat with their doctor, the panel doctors, for the first 90 days. If your claim gets denied, then you're off the hook. You can treat anywhere you want. But after that 90 days, if your claim is accepted by workers' comp, then you're free. You can treat with anybody after that 90-day period. So the employers and their carriers have control in most cases in that first 3-month period. And then after that 90-day mark, we usually send them to a different doctor because the panel doctors tend to be biased and really trying to minimize the nature of the injury and rushing people back to work. So after that 90 days, unless the client's really comfortable with the doctor, in which case we wouldn't, change things up. We tend to recommend a different doctor so they can get a little bit more of an objective and maybe more specialized look at their injuries.
Can a person actually settle their case without a lawyer?
They can, but it's not a smart move. I mean, I mentioned the stat earlier. I believe it was a study done out of, I want to say Minnesota, but it looked at all the states and they came up with something along the lines of like injured workers who have representation will get 2 to 3 times more on average. So I see that here too. We have a lot of people who settle their case on their own. They call us, they want to unravel the settlement and it's too late. Our hearings, our settlements in Pennsylvania have to be approved at a hearing in front of a judge called a compromise and release agreement. And once that's approved, it's over. So a lot of people make the mistake and they do this on their own and they settle their case for peanuts and then it's too late. So you can do it. They call it pro se, meaning by yourself, but it's not recommended unless you have something really simple. Maybe you're out of work for a month and you're looking for your, $2,000. Maybe you do that on your own and you're fully recovered. But the bigger cases involving more disability, it's really senseless to go about this by yourself.
How long does it take to get a case before a judge?
Well, it goes before the judge anytime a petition is filed. So let's say our client comes to us, their claim was denied by the workers' comp carrier. We'll file a claim petition. It'll be in court about 2 to 3 weeks later on average. Then you'll have a series of hearings, usually every 90 days until the end of the case. So once you're in court, a petition can take about a year to get to the final decision from the judge. Good news is most of the cases will settle instead of going that full distance. So you end up in court when either the insurance company's attorney or the injured worker's attorney files a petition, and then you're in court a few weeks later.
Can you appeal a decision from a judge?
Absolutely, yeah. That's part of our due process here in America, and really what makes our legal system great. Each side has the right to present their case. If they don't like the outcome, you can appeal it. In workers' comp, the initial appeal to the appeal board, which is the next level up, is a 20-day period. So you get a decision from the judge. If you're not happy with it, you can appeal it. Most of them don't get overturned. You have to find that the judge committed an error of law or they ignored substantial evidence. Most of the time, the judges write a pretty good opinion and explain which witness they find more credible than the other. Then you're pretty much stuck with the results. Doesn't mean you can't win on appeal, but the odds are probably 5% or less of getting something overturned. So we encourage settlement if the numbers are fair, if you have a close call case, because otherwise you're letting the judge decide your fate versus controlling it yourself with a resolution or settlement.
Is that done by a judge or a jury?
The settlements?
Yes.
Well, the cases, in general, they're heard before a workers' comp judge. So, for example, in your scenario earlier, Steve, about the truck accident, that trucker in their personal injury case would be in front of a jury for their trial. In the workers' comp case, there's no jury in Pennsylvania. You have a workers' comp judge. that your case gets assigned to. So, you know, you really got to know your judge and sort of how they lean on close call issues and these kind of things, because that can really make a big difference when it's just one person versus, you know, a mixture of 9, 10, 11 people.
Michael, I got to tell you, your show always goes by so fast. Let's give everybody your website address, because there's a lot of great information on there, as well as how they can reach you by phone.
Sure. The website is cardamonelaw.com. That's CARDAMONELAW. So cardamonelaw.com. Our phone number is 215-206-9068. And if somebody wants to email, sometimes people get a little bit shy, which is fine. They can email us. It's Michael, so MICHAEL at cardamonelaw.com.
Michael is with us twice every month. He'll be back with us again next month. Michael, travel safe. You're the best.
You too.
We love you, bro.
Talk to you soon, Steve. Enjoyed it.
That's Attorney Michael Cardamone. God, he is really good. When it comes to workers' comp law, I'm telling you, you should contact him. You don't have to pay him a dime unless he wins for you. And it's just so crazy not to have an attorney to represent you if you get hurt. Well, that's it for us today. We'll be back again next week with more Ask the Experts. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.